The conference room fell silent as Robert Parker slammed his fist on the polished mahogany table. His face had turned an alarming shade of red, veins bulging on his forehead as he glared directly at me. "You think you know better than me, Anderson," he shouted, spittle flying from his mouth. "You think you run this company? My name is Mike Anderson. I was 35 years old and had been the lead project manager at Westfield Tech for 7 years. I'd built my reputation on solving problems, delivering projects on time, and saving the company millions with my innovative solutions. I'm just pointing out that the Harrington contract needs more realistic deadlines," I said calmly, aware that all 20 of my colleagues were watching this confrontation with wide eyes. "The timeline you've set is impossible. We'll lose the client when we fail to deliver. That was my mistake. Questioning Robert Parker publicly, even when I was right. Even when I was trying to save the company from disaster." Parker's nostrils flared. "Well, since you find it so impossible to meet my expectations, maybe Westfield Tech isn't the right place for you anymore." The room went completely silent. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the faint ticking of the wall clock. "Are you firing me?" I asked, hardly believing what was happening. "Effective immediately," Parker said with a cold smile. "For insubordination and undermining company leadership. Clear out your desk by noon." I looked around the table. Some colleagues stared at their laptops, avoiding eye contact. Others watched with expressions of shock or pity. My direct team members looked horrified, but no one spoke up. They couldn't risk their own jobs. As I stood to leave, Parker added the final touch to my humiliation. "Security will escort you out. Can't have disgruntled ex-employees wandering around, can we?" I gathered my dignity and walked to the door, where 2 security guards were already waiting. As I left, I heard Parker continue the meeting as if nothing had happened, his voice carrying down the hallway. "Now, as I was saying about the Harrington contract. Being marched through the office by security was the most humiliating experience of my professional life. Colleagues peeked over cubicle walls, whispers following me as I carried the cardboard box containing 7 years of my career. My assistant, Jenny, was in tears. "This is so unfair, Mike," she whispered as I passed her desk. I just nodded. What could I say? Outside in the parking lot, I sat in my car for nearly an hour, too stunned to drive. 7 years of dedicated service, countless weekends worked, family events missed for company emergencies, all erased in a moment of Parker's rage. The truth was, Robert Parker had always felt threatened by me. I was good at my job, too good. Clients requested me specifically. The CEO had mentioned promoting me to the executive team at the last company retreat. Parker had been watching me climb the ladder with growing resentment. My phone buzzed with text messages from colleagues. "Tom, can't believe what just happened. Parker's gone insane. Jenny, the whole team is in shock. This is so wrong. Melissa, we're all updating our resumes after that display." I appreciated their support, but messages wouldn't pay my mortgage or explain to my wife why I suddenly had no job. That evening, breaking the news to Sarah was painful. We had just bought our house last year, and with 2 young kids, we relied on my steady income. "He can't just fire you for pointing out a problem," Sarah said, pacing our kitchen. "That's wrongful termination. I had already spoken to an attorney. Technically, he can. Minnesota is an at-will employment state. He just can't fire me for discriminatory reasons." "This is about his ego, isn't it?" Sarah asked, knowing Parker from company events. "He couldn't handle being challenged." "Pretty much," I agreed. "Especially not in front of the whole team." "What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? I could fight it legally, but that would be expensive and drain my energy. I could immediately look for another job, but Parker's influence in our industry would make that difficult. He'd make sure everyone knew I was fired for insubordination. I took a deep breath. First, I'm going to help Westfield's clients who trust me. Then, I'm going to build something better than Parker could ever imagine. Sarah raised an eyebrow. What does that mean exactly? I smiled for the first time that day. It means Parker just made the biggest mistake of his career. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:30 a.m. It was John Harrington, CEO of Harrington Industries and Westfield's biggest client. Mike, what the hell is going on? I just got a message that you're no longer handling our account. I explained what had happened as professionally as possible, not bad-mouthing Parker or Westfield despite how tempting it was. John was silent for a moment. So Parker fired you because you said our project needed more realistic deadlines? That's the short version, yes. Well, that's concerning, considering we specifically requested you for this project. He paused. What are your plans now? I'm exploring my options, I said carefully. Let's meet for lunch, John suggested. The Oak Grill, 1 p.m. When I arrived at the upscale restaurant, John was already seated in a private corner booth. He wasn't alone. With him were representatives from 3 other major Westfield clients. Hope you don't mind, John said with a grin. When I told these folks what happened, they wanted to join our conversation. Over the next 2 hours, I learned that all 4 companies were concerned about their projects without my leadership. Parker had already reassigned their accounts to managers they didn't know or trust. We signed with Westfield because of you, Mike, said Elaine from Tensor Medical. Your reputation for delivering is why we took the risk with a mid-sized firm instead of going with the big players. By dessert, they had made me an offer I hadn't expected, consulting contracts with all 4 companies, starting immediately. We still need your expertise, John explained. If Westfield won't provide it, we'll hire you directly. I thought about Parker's face when he realized his biggest clients were still working with me. The satisfaction would be sweet, but something in me wanted more than just short-term revenge. I appreciate the offer, I told them. But I'm thinking of something more permanent. What if I started my own firm? One that treats clients and employees with respect. The 4 executives exchanged glances. If you did, John said slowly, would you have room for the Harrington account? And Tensor Medical, Elaine added. By the time lunch ended, I had verbal commitments from all 4 companies, representing contracts worth over $2 million annually. It was more than enough to launch my own tech solutions firm. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Jenny, my former assistant. Parker is freaking out. Harrington called him directly and threatened to pull their business. 6 other people quit today. This place is imploding. I smiled as I got into my car. The seed of my revenge had been planted, but it would take years to fully bloom. I named my new company Horizon Solutions. With the client commitment secured at lunch, I leased a small office space and started making calls to former colleagues who I knew were unhappy at Westfield. Within a month, I had hired 10 former Westfield employees, including my entire project team. Jenny was my first hire, promoted to operations manager. Tom became my lead developer. Melissa took over as client relations director. Parker sent threatening letters through Westfield's attorneys, claiming we were violating non-compete clauses. My lawyer pointed out that Parker had terminated us without cause, rendering most of those clauses unenforceable. The legal threat stopped, but Parker's vendetta was just beginning. He began spreading rumors in the industry that I had stolen Westfield's clients and proprietary information. He called our clients directly, offering steep discounts to win them back. None of it worked. The clients had chosen to follow me for a reason. They trusted my team and my approach. Parker called me yesterday, John Harrington told me over dinner 6 months after Horizon launched. Offered to cut their fee by 30% if we came back. That's a substantial discount, I remarked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Did you consider it? John laughed. Mike, we didn't leave Westfield because of their prices. We left because Parker is impossible to work with and you deliver results. Speaking of which, my board is thrilled with the new inventory system your team built. It's already saving us a fortune. By our one-year anniversary, Horizon Solutions had grown to 25 employees and moved to larger offices. We had acquired 7 more major clients beyond the original 4. Our reputation for excellence, transparency, and realistic project timelines was spreading throughout the industry. Meanwhile, Westfield Tech was struggling. Without their biggest clients and with their reputation damaged by high employee turnover, they were taking on smaller, less profitable projects just to keep the lights on. I heard through industry contacts that Parker was blaming everyone but himself. The economy, unfair competition, disloyal employees, anyone and anything but his own poor leadership. 3 years after my humiliating firing, Horizon Solutions was recognized as one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the Midwest. We had expanded to 60 employees and opened a second office in Chicago. I was invited to speak at the same industry conferences that had once featured Parker as a thought leader. At one such conference, I spotted Parker in the audience during my keynote speech on building a people-first tech company. He looked older, grayer, and significantly less confident than the man who had fired me. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away and left the room. I felt a momentary satisfaction but reminded myself that true success wouldn't come from Parker's failure. It would come from building something meaningful that outlasted both of us. Still, I couldn't help but notice the irony. Parker had fired me to maintain his power and control. In doing so, he had created his most formidable competitor and accelerated his own downfall. But the real revenge was still to come. 5 years after my firing, I received an unexpected call from William Caldwell, the majority shareholder and board chairman of Westfield Tech. "Mike, I'll get straight to the point," he said after pleasantries. "Westfield is in trouble. Robert Parker's leadership has driven the company to the brink of bankruptcy. The board has removed him as CEO, but the damage may be too extensive to repair." I leaned back in my chair, surprised at this development. "I'm sorry to hear that, William. Westfield was a good company before Parker took over." "It was," William agreed. "And that's why I'm calling you. The board is considering selling Westfield rather than trying to rebuild. Given your history with the company and your success with Horizon, I wanted to speak with you before putting it on the market." My heart raced as I realized what he was suggesting. "Are you offering me the chance to buy Westfield?" "Yes," William said simply. "You know its potential better than anyone, and frankly, there's a certain poetic justice to it." I asked for the company financials and promised to consider the offer. After hanging up, I sat in silence, absorbing the magnitude of the opportunity. I could own the company that had so publicly discarded me. The financial reports painted a grim picture. Westfield's client list had shrunk to less than a third of its former size. Their cash reserves were nearly depleted. The company was worth barely 20% of its value when I had worked there. From a purely business perspective, acquiring Westfield made sense. They still had good technology, some talented employees who had stayed despite Parker, and a few valuable client relationships. Horizon could absorb these assets and grow even stronger. But my motivation wasn't just business. It was personal. This was the culmination of the revenge I had quietly been building for 5 years. After discussing it with Sarah and my executive team, I made a fair but firm offer to William and the board. They accepted within 48 hours. There were no other serious buyers. The purchase agreement included one unusual condition: I requested that Robert Parker be present for the official ownership transfer. William was puzzled but agreed. "Parker's on a consulting contract that runs another month," he explained. "He still has an office at headquarters, though he rarely comes in. I'll make sure he's there." The day of the ownership transfer was set for June 15th, exactly 5 years and 1 month after the day Parker had fired me. I arrived at Westfield Tech headquarters 15 minutes early for the 10 a.m. meeting. The receptionist, not recognizing me, asked for my name and appointment details. "Mike Anderson. I have a meeting with the board." Her eyes widened slightly. Everyone at Westfield knew who Mike Anderson was by now, the former employee who had built a competing firm that was now acquiring their company. William Caldwell greeted me in the lobby, shaking my hand warmly. "The conference room is ready." "Same one as always." It was the same conference room where Parker had fired me 5 years ago. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Inside, the remaining board members were seated around the table, along with Westfield's attorneys and my own legal team. Robert Parker sat at the far end, his expression a mixture of boredom and annoyance. He clearly didn't understand why his presence was required. When I walked in, Parker's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, shock, and finally, anger. He hadn't been told who was acquiring the company. "What is he doing here?" Parker demanded, standing abruptly. "Mr. Anderson is Horizon Solutions CEO and the buyer of Westfield Tech," William explained calmly. "Please sit down, Robert. This is a business transaction." Parker remained standing, his face flushed with anger, much like it had been the day he fired me. "This is ridiculous. You're selling to him? Of all people?" "We're selling to the highest bidder," one of the other board members said flatly. "The fact that it's Mr. Anderson is coincidental." It wasn't coincidental, of course. My success and Parker's failure had directly led to this moment. But I maintained a professional demeanor as I took my seat at the head of the table, Parker's former position. The attorneys began reviewing the final documents. As they discussed the terms of the sale, I watched Parker. He stared at the table, refusing to look at me, his hands clenched into fists. When it was time to sign, I picked up the pen and paused. "Before we finalize this, I'd like to share my vision for Westfield's future," I said. All eyes turned to me. Parker finally looked up, his gaze filled with resentment. "Westfield was once a great company with talented people," I began. "Under Horizon's ownership, we'll restore that greatness. We'll implement the same people-first policies that have made Horizon successful. We'll rehire some former employees who left due to poor management. And we'll rebuild client relationships that were damaged in recent years." I looked directly at Parker now. "We'll create a company where good ideas are valued, regardless of who suggests them. Where pointing out potential problems is seen as an act of loyalty, not insubordination." Parker's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "In short," I concluded, "we'll build the company that Westfield could have been all along." I signed the documents with a steady hand. One by one, the board members and attorneys added their signatures. The deal was done. Westfield Tech was now mine. As people began gathering their papers and preparing to leave, I addressed Parker directly for the first time. "Mr. Parker, could I have a word with you privately?" The room quickly emptied, leaving just the two of us in the conference room where our paths had diverged 5 years earlier. Parker stood defensively by the door. "Say what you need to say, Anderson. I assume you'll want my office cleared out by the end of the day." "Actually," I said, "I wanted to thank you." He blinked in surprise. "Thank me?" "Yes. 5 years ago, you fired me in this very room because I suggested a project needed more realistic deadlines. It was the best thing that ever happened to me professionally." I stood and walked closer to him. "If you hadn't let your ego make that decision, I might still be working here, helping you build your company instead of creating my own. I might never have discovered what I was truly capable of." Parker's expression darkened. "So you bought Westfield just to rub it in my face? To humiliate me like you think I humiliated you?" I shook my head. "No. I bought Westfield because it's a good business decision. The fact that it brings our story full circle is just, what did the board member call it? Coincidental." I extended my hand. "Your consulting contract runs until the end of the month. You're welcome to finish it out, or we can pay the remainder as severance. Your choice." Parker looked at my outstretched hand with contempt but finally shook it briefly. "I'll be gone by lunch," he muttered. As he turned to leave, I couldn't resist one final comment. "Oh, and Robert. For what it's worth, the Harrington contract did have impossible deadlines. They fired Westfield 3 months after you fired me, exactly when I predicted the project would fail. He paused at the door but didn't turn around. His shoulders slumped slightly as he walked out. I stood alone in the conference room, experiencing a complex mixture of emotions. There was satisfaction, certainly. Vindication. But also a strange sense of emptiness. Revenge, even served this cold and complete, wasn't as fulfilling as I had imagined. What filled me with genuine pride was not Parker's downfall but what I had built in the process of overtaking him. Horizon Solutions employed over 100 people now, with the acquisition of Westfield adding 50 more. We had created a company culture that valued innovation, honesty, and work-life balance. Our clients trusted us, and our employees were proud to work for us. That was the real victory, not the defeat of an enemy, but the creation of something meaningful. The integration of Westfield into Horizon Solutions proceeded more smoothly than expected. Most of Westfield's remaining employees were relieved by the change in ownership. They had witnessed the company's decline under Parker's leadership and welcomed a fresh approach. On my first day as the new owner, I called an all-hands meeting in Westfield's largest conference room. Employees filled every seat and lined the walls, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity, anxiety, and hope. "Many of you know who I am," I began. "For those who don't, my name is Mike Anderson. I worked at Westfield for 7 years before starting Horizon Solutions. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for both companies." I explained our integration plan, emphasizing that there would be no immediate layoffs. Every employee would have the opportunity to demonstrate their value to the combined organization. Westfield lost its way because leadership stopped listening, I told them. That ends today. My door is always open. Your ideas matter. Your concerns matter. After the meeting, several employees approached me with stories of working under Parker's regime. They described a toxic culture of fear, blame, and favoritism. Some were close to tears as they expressed relief that things were changing. Over the following weeks, I spent time with each department, learning about their projects, challenges, and ideas for improvement. I discovered pockets of innovation that had been stifled under Parker's leadership, promising initiatives that had been abandoned because they didn't align with his vision or benefit his favorites. One such project was a cloud-based analytics platform developed by a team led by David Chen, a brilliant but quiet engineer who had been repeatedly passed over for promotion because he didn't engage in office politics. Parker told me it was too experimental, David explained as he demonstrated the platform. But I kept working on it in whatever spare time I could find. I was impressed by what I saw. This could revolutionize how our clients handle their data analytics. Why don't you assemble a small team and focus on getting this ready for market? I think you'll make an excellent project director. David's surprise quickly gave way to enthusiasm. Really? You're giving me a team. I'm giving you an opportunity, I corrected. What you do with it is up to you. Similar conversations played out across the company as I identified talented individuals who had been overlooked or marginalized. Some had nearly left but stayed due to family obligations or limited options in the local job market. Now they had a chance to thrive. 6 months after the acquisition, we rebranded the combined company as Horizon Technologies. The new name represented a fresh start while honoring the foundation built by both original companies. The rechristening ceremony was held in the atrium of our expanded headquarters. As I prepared to address the gathered employees, I noticed a familiar face at the back of the crowd. Jenny, now my Chief Operating Officer, followed my gaze. Is that who I think it is? Robert Parker stood awkwardly near the exit, dressed in a suit that seemed looser than I remembered. He had aged considerably in the past 6 months. I'll handle this, I told Jenny, making my way through the crowd. Parker tensed as I approached. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome, he said stiffly. Your assistant sent an invitation to all former employees and executives. Everyone was invited, I confirmed. Including you. He glanced around at the transformed space, the employees mingling happily, the energy that filled the room. "You've done well," he admitted reluctantly. "Better than I would have expected." Coming from Parker, this was as close to an apology as I would ever get. "Thank you for coming," I said, extending my hand once more. This time, he shook it firmly. "Congratulations, Mike. You've built something impressive here." As Parker turned to leave, I made a spontaneous decision. "Robert, wait. Stay for the announcement. See what we've built." He hesitated, then nodded and followed me back to the center of the atrium. I took my place at the podium and surveyed the room filled with over 150 employees, the combined workforce of what had once been rival companies. 5 years ago, I sat in my car in the Westfield parking lot after being fired, wondering what would happen next. I began. Today, I stand before you as proof that endings can become beginnings. I shared my vision for Horizon Technologies, a company that would lead the industry not just in technology solutions but in how we treated employees, clients, and the community. "We'll make mistakes along the way," I acknowledged. "But we'll never punish people for speaking up, for questioning, for trying to make things better. That's a promise." As applause filled the atrium, I glanced at Parker. He stood silently at the back, his expression unreadable. Then he gave me a single nod before slipping out the door. I understood his gesture. It wasn't friendship or forgiveness, but recognition. Acknowledgement that I had not just defeated him but transcended our rivalry to build something neither of us could have created alone. That evening, as the celebration wound down, I found myself back in my office, formerly Parker's corner office with its impressive view of the city skyline. Jenny joined me, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "To Horizon Technologies," she said, handing me a glass. "And to the best boss I've ever had." I smiled, thinking of how far we'd come. To second chances and unexpected journeys. As we looked out over the city, I reflected on the strange path that had led me here. Parker's attempt to destroy my career had instead been the catalyst for my greatest success. His cruelty had ultimately resulted in a better company, better opportunities for hundreds of employees, and better service for our clients. "You know what they say," Jenny remarked, seeming to read my thoughts. "Success is the best revenge." I shook my head slightly. "I don't think it's about revenge anymore. It's about growth. Parker taught me what kind of leader I didn't want to be. Everything since then has been about building something better." Jenny raised her glass again. "To building something better, then." "To building something better," I agreed. In the end, that was the greatest lesson from my journey from fired employee to company owner. True victory wasn't about defeating an enemy. It was about creating something valuable that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Parker had fired me in a moment of anger, thinking he was eliminating a threat. Instead, he had set in motion events that transformed both our lives, and an entire company, forever. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't planned at all. It's simply becoming the person you were meant to be all along. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And please, feel free to share your own experiences and thoughts in the comments below. Your voice, your story, it truly matters.